to the Web3 Prof Podcast.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with James Bettauer, who is the CEO and co-founder of EcoToken. Thanks so much for being with me here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jarrett.
So you have an interesting career path, probably one of the most unique career paths that I've heard when it comes to someone working in Web3 type of stuff. So let's get a little bit of a sense of who you are, like where did you come from, and what brought you into Web3?
So I guess a bit of a strange background. Like you said, I was a hockey player for my entire life and still am actually. So as a hockey player growing up, I played professionally now for 10 years and it gives you a lot of free time. So kind of went down the crypto rabbit hole while I was doing my degree, also while playing, and started doing my dissertation on carbon credits, and that kind of led me down that path. And simultaneously I've been really focused on life after hockey, kind of building that while playing. So I've been working with an environmental water treatment company for just on and off, kind of joining the meetings for the past 6 or 7 years. And then they kind of mingled together in my dissertation, and EcoToken kind of took form.
So was this grad school that you were writing a dissertation for?
Yeah.
Okay. Where did you go to grad school?
So in Sheffield University in the UK, they have a program where you can get your master's degree while playing. So I was really lucky to take advantage of that. And
is that where you were playing as well? Were you playing in Sheffield?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in 2019, I moved there to play. It's a 2-year degree.
Yeah.
But then actually COVID hit, and I wound up finishing it online in Germany while playing in Germany.
Okay. Oh, you got traded.
Well, they didn't even have a year. It was completely shut down because of COVID.
Right. Of course. Okay. Things were kind of wild at that point. So you grew up. So when you're growing up playing hockey, were you thinking, along environmental lines at that point, or was it only until you got to university when you started thinking, oh, this kind of stuff is important to pay attention to?
I think around when I started with NOAA in about 2015, maybe, I started getting on my radar, and it was mostly a focus on water was the bigger priority as opposed to a macro environment.
Right. Okay. So when you you co-founded EcoToken with a friend of yours. So can you kind of, in a brief summary, explain what EcoToken is?
Yeah, EcoToken is a platform to bring environmental projects online. So instead of a centralized approach to fixing climate issues, it's sort of allowing small projects to get funding to do the projects, the localized environmental projects that they want to. And it was born from a problem that the water company always had, where we had this great technology and these places that we could put it into action, but it was always missing either the business case or the funding to get it going.
Right. And
EcoToken was sort of meant to be a solution to that, where projects can come in to seek the funding that they want, and then people who are interested in that can fund the project and earn, hopefully, some kind of a return off of that, whether that be environmental credits or whatever's produced from that project.
Okay. So what is the relationship between EcoToken and carbon credits?
Well, carbon credits, so we operate in the voluntary credit market, and currently the voluntary credit market has a huge barrier to entry, and that's why these small scale projects can't get off the ground, because to get a project verified with a new methodology from Vera can cost upwards of $1 million. So it really doesn't make small scale projects viable.
Right.
So we're working with the Regen Network. That's a decentralized ledger service for environmental credits that anyone can produce their own methodology and go through a peer review process and then bring voluntary credits on chain.
Right.
So we work with them to bring all of these new smaller scale environmental projects online.
So is Regen a blockchain on its own? Is it a layer 1 blockchain?
It is. It's on the Cosmos network.
Okay. So it's not its own blockchain. It uses Cosmos.
It is its own blockchain. So Cosmos is like a layer 0 foundational layer, and then blockchains are built on top of it.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So when you see this problem with small organizations raising capital for their environmental initiatives, if I understand correctly, it was on that basis that you found EcoToken. It was kind of that was the gap that you're trying to fill.
Yeah, we wanted to take away the pure reliance on philanthropy to make these projects happen,
Right.
and to try to provide an economic incentive behind them.
So I guess right now when we see kind of environmental projects, so you mentioned philanthropy, I guess it's not sustainable in that way. If you're always seeking out donations and fundraising, there isn't a sustainable model around sustainability, ironically.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not as scalable either. So in order to, I think, reach mass adoption or to be able to complete all of these projects, there needs to be some kind of a system behind it that rewards the people that are creating them, and rewards the people that are funding them.
So I hear this term refi, regenerative finance. Is that right? What does that mean? What is the term?
Yeah, regenerative finance, exactly. It's sort of a new system so right now we have the base carbon credit system, and it's centralized with a few verification bodies that can produce a methodology, and it's pretty slow and clunky, and they have these centralized ledgers and databases where credits can be issued. Been a lot of issues around that, like double counting and double spending of credits.
Right.
It's slowly getting worked out, but refi is more, at least the long-term vision, it's growing very quickly, but there's the credit layer, like the regen, there's the projects actually happening, but then there's also the verification of those projects, and it's becoming more and more autonomous. So there's all these projects popping up. They can use satellite data to verify projects are happening, and they're on the blockchain. So it's irrefutable evidence that these are happening.
Yeah.
And it gives more credit to the carbon credits, or more validity.
So someone doesn't need to get in their truck and drive down to check out this thing.
Exactly.
To see if it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're working towards, to make it completely trustless.
Right.
And it's a process, but the space is moving very quickly.
Okay. So and is refi engaged in reforestation and farming and water treatment, desalination? Like, how far does this go?
It goes really far. So there's some limitations in the carbon credit market. It's strictly based on carbon, whereas the refi space is focused on all types of credits, like marine biodiversity, water treatment, also wildlife habitat. There's quite a few different types of credits.
Yeah.
And it's not strictly focused on carbon.
So if I understand this correctly, so in refi, you can create new methodologies for credits, maybe based on, wildlife regeneration or something like that. And it's much cheaper and much quicker to create this new system, which allows people to start doing better things faster. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know much about the environmental movement. Just because I live here in Vancouver doesn't mean... this is where it all started, right? We're at like the hub of the environmental movement, right? Greenpeace started here. And David Suzuki, he lives up the street from me. And so to me, this is where it all started. Okay, so when we look at carbon credits, is refi going to surpass carbon credit system? Is this going to become bigger than what we see with carbon credits?
I hope so. I think that it's a logical next step for the carbon credit industry to go onto the blockchain.
Yeah.
I think that they're already starting to do that.
Right.
I think Vera's already looking into it. So I think they will migrate, and we'll probably have two systems, the more centralized system and the more decentralized system.
Right.
And I think it might take them longer to get on board with all of the different types of credits aside from carbon.
Okay.
So I think that that's really refi's chance to break ahead and to change the game.
Right. So why do we, why is the decentralization of this system? Let's say you could create a new methodology more efficiently in the centralized system. Why do we care about the decentralization of credits?
Well, it's the scalability factor. So once DeSci is decentralized science is a term coined in the refi industry.
DeSci.
DeSci, yeah.
Okay.
That's
a
kind of
new
the
one.
verification component and all that. But basically, if you want small, like you or I to act in the best interest of the environment eventually, and you want to start your own home farm with regenerative farming, then at some point, once the verification is good enough, you'll be able to produce your own environmental credits and be rewarded for that. And once we can start rewarding individuals for acting in the best interest of the environment, then I think that's where you're going to see the biggest impact. And you can't do that from a centralized way.
So I personally, I live, in the city, but I have chickens and I got 2 beehives and I compost and I have a garden and I've got a greenhouse. So I feel like I'm doing good things, but I guess right now the only incentive I have to do that is me caring about the environment, or I guess the enjoyment of it. But there's certainly there isn't really a financial reason for me to do this, because it actually costs kind of a lot of money to do this type of stuff. And so you're saying there is a potential that down the road that I, as a self-proclaimed urban farmer, could actually benefit financially from this by maybe saving on my property tax or something like that.
Yeah, that's the goal. At least one of them is to have it so that acting in the best interest of the environment isn't a financial burden for you.
This is way better than the current system. Okay, so how can carbon credits solve what governments can't through decentralization?
Well, if you look at the non-voluntary market in Canada right now, there's a deficit of credits. It's just because they're not approving them, and
so we can't get. If I want to go buy carbon credits, there's not enough of them out there for me to buy
in the non-voluntary space.
Okay, can you explain maybe the difference between voluntary and non-voluntary?
Basically, non-voluntary is government mandated.
Okay.
Yeah, so the credits that they say companies like oil companies that need to reduce their carbon footprint, they need the non-voluntary credits.
Okay.
And those can only be approved by the government, but there's a shortage because they don't approve enough.
What? So is it just because they're just bureaucratic?
Yeah.
Just the same old problem, right? Okay, nothing that complicated, it's just bureaucracy can't get them approved. So if an oil company wants to buy carbon credits, they just can't there's just not enough of them. Does that mean that the carbon credit value goes up? Is the price controlled by the market for those credits?
Yeah, well, they have their approach where I think it goes along with the carbon tax. So the carbon tax right now is 50, or maybe it boosted up to 60 in 2023. I'm not sure exactly, but it's set to go to $170 by 2030.
Okay.
But those are, so basically the non-voluntary credits are going to fall just below that.
Okay.
So because there's a supply shortage, it's going to be pretty much in line with the tax, because if you buy that credit, you don't have to pay the tax.
Yeah, so there's no point in buying the credit if it's worth more than the actual tax you're going to pay.
Yeah.
You just then rather pay the tax.
Yeah, except for what good does that do for the environment?
For sure. Okay, I get that. That makes sense. So what is the future of this? Or so let me back up. So what's EcoToken specifically doing? And maybe tell us some maybe a couple stories about a couple of the projects that you guys are working on today.
Sure. Yeah. So we're trying to bring on new methodologies and new credits to the market, and we're basically putting packages together where they can be projects that are pre-funded.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, we're also heavily focused on water credits.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a project in Florida that has a water or septic treatment facility. Right now, they're trucking all of the water 250 miles away across state lines to dump it in the fields, because the environmental regulations allow for that. And if you can go and, for relatively low cost, treat that water on site and distribute it back into the system, that water's entering back into a water short market in Florida.
Right.
And that's actually reducing. We worked up, it's about 8,000 tons of CO2 over the 5-year period of the project.
That
just
basically
based
is
on the transport.
Yeah, so that's the trucks going back and forth. Like how much, that seems just absurd to me. Like how much water can a truck realistically carry across state lines? Like they must have continual flow of vehicles.
Yeah, well, 5,000 gallons is a truck. Site's doing between 6,000 and 30,000 gallons a day. So
okay.
Truck a day at least going.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so what do they pour it on the farmers' fields? The farmers want this water?
Yeah, because the regulations are different. So it's not great for the soil. There's a lot of excess phosphorus and
Right.
stuff like that. So it's pretty corrosive to the soil.
So the
overall.
farmers want it because it's free, or like why would they take it?
Free, yeah.
Okay. And so water, it's hard to imagine living here that would be desirable when we have a continual flood of rain pouring down from the sky.
Yeah, so I don't think the water credit market is going to be as big in Vancouver as
Right.
opposed to California.
Sure. Yeah. I saw today a company that has built it's basically a thing you drive your car on, and when you wash your car, it collects all the water so that you can like suck it up and then reuse it for the next time you wash your car, because water restrictions are becoming so intense that you can't wash your car or something. I don't really understand, but it seems crazy to me that is the situation that we're in, right?
Yeah, and I think that that's going to become more and more of an issue, especially in places like California, maybe not Vancouver, but
Yeah.
in California, when people are not allowed to shower for more than 2.5 minutes a day, whatever it might be, and you have company XYZ sucking up 1 billion cubic meters of water a year, you
Yeah.
might start to piss you off a little bit.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy that the river that made the Grand Canyon doesn't make it to the ocean. You know, like that's how much water they're using up for something like that. Okay, so that's fascinating. So what makes carbon credits more or less valuable, both in reality and from an impact perspective?
Yeah, so I guess so carbon sequestration is generally more value because it's actually sucking carbon out of the atmosphere.
Okay.
But then I think one thing that's underlooked or undervalued at the moment is the external impacts, or the other impacts of those carbon credits. So pure carbon capture from the environment, yes, it sequesters, but it doesn't have any other positive impacts, whereas maybe regenerative farming actually sequesters the carbon, or kelp is a really interesting one. So kelp sequesters the carbon and it drops it to the bottom of the sea. It's also the time that carbon is sequestered for. So if it's 1,000 years, then that's more valuable than something that's only blocked for 10 years.
So when it sends it down to the bottom of the ocean, it just stays there?
Yeah.
It's not used up in any way?
No.
Okay. Fish aren't eating it or something?
No, not if it sinks down. And that's where the verification process still isn't complete on that particular model. That's why there's not an existing kelp credit
I see.
yet.
Yeah. So then what's the idea there, that you guys would then work with a kelp farmer who would then need to raise money? You would partner with them through EcoToken and help them create kelp farms? Is that a thing?
Yeah. Kelp farmings are a big thing. And one thing that we want to, so the vision I see in the future of like a kelp farm would be pre-funding that project to bring it to life through EcoToken.
Yeah.
And then that project would then produce, a portion of it would be in carbon credits, because it's not all the carbon sequesters won't sink to the bottom of the ocean, but there's also a lot of food that's produced off that. So potentially you could have the carbon sequestered being carbon credits, and then the food being packaged up and donated and turned into a food credit, because that's something else that's a possibility.
So you wouldn't take the food and sell it?
You could, yeah.
Okay.
That's another way to sustain operations. I'm just saying if it was a purely philanthropic,
Right. Oh, I see.
only blockchain
Yeah.
kind of project.
And the kelp is, are people eating kelp? Like, is this what's in my sushi?
Yeah.
Okay.
The kelp is delicious. You can get the roasted kelp at
Costco.
Yeah.
My kids love that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not like a huge fan, that's fine, but yeah, they just like eat it like sandwiches.
Yeah.
And so this could potentially be not only feeding my kids, but this also is or could be helping the environment by planting more and more kelp farms around the coast of British Columbia, for example.
Oh yeah, it's definitely helping the environment.
Is this a model here? Do we have kelp farms here in British Columbia?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a few.
Is it a big thing?
Yeah, and it's growing very quickly.
I guess you have to get government permission to plant kelp somewhere and harvest it. I'm sure there's a regulatory process.
Yeah, you kind of have to lease the ocean floor or something like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Who knew? I'm learning a lot here today. So what do you see as a realistic approach to scaling up environmental action?
I think it's building up the verification process
Mhm.
and raising awareness around the types of credits and the action that can be taken.
Right.
And then, just more people getting involved in the process. And I think that the realistic approach, or the best approach, is through refi and blockchain because I don't think it's going to happen in the centralized markets.
Do you think that that kind of like saving the environment or doing good environmental things can happen without a financial incentive? Are people willing to pay more? Are people willing to pay a lot more to help the environment? Or do we really need a strong financial reason to do this, generally speaking?
Well, I think that depends on the state of the economy. You know,
Okay.
if people are thriving, then people are more philanthropic. But
Right.
if we're heading into tough economic times, which it seems like we might be,
Right.
then you probably need to have a bit more of a financial incentive to get people more involved.
So when we look at environmental stuff, a lot of times it seems like when you peel back the onion, when you kind of look behind the curtain, you start to realize that some of the things that we think are good for the environment down the line, especially down the supply chain, maybe it's like, you know, the rare earth minerals used in batteries or something like that, actually really do a lot of harm socially or environmentally or both. And so what we think is going to be good, or what we're told is going to be good, actually, if we actually understand the whole process, is harmful. Do you think that decentralization can help us understand maybe the supply chain process or any of the kind of mystery behind this?
For sure. I think, well, for that, part of that would probably come down to decentralization of media a bit, to be able to get your information from different sources, because we have this very strong narrative power around like wind and solar, so you'll never hear the negative cases for that, but there seems to be a very negative opinion of nuclear in the media and the narrative. So that would be something. And then yeah, sorry, what was the
is there when you look behind the curtain, can decentralization help us? So if we decentralize the media, then we might get honest feedback on to what actually is good and what actually is bad. Maybe supply chain. Can we continue to decentralize supply chain, or can we put the supply chain on the blockchain, and then maybe get an understanding of where the rare earth minerals came from for my iPhone? So I actually know they didn't come from a mine in Central Africa, which was mined by a child or something like that. Yeah,
because unfortunately, a huge amount of cobalt, for example, comes from child labor.
Right.
So yeah, that is possible. Like they have, I think, Sawtooth as a company, they have like a supply chain management based on the blockchain, and that technology is coming up quite quickly. So that'll solve some of those problems for sure, because it'll be nice to know when you can, kind of maybe scan something that you're about to purchase and see exactly where things came from. And there have to be verifiable certification bodies. And I think that those certification bodies may eventually become like DAOs.
Right.
So that it's not up to one centralized entity that can kind of be corrupted. Right. And
I guess that's kind of the challenge sometimes, is that maybe you've seen Seaspiracy on Netflix. Have you watched that? And they kind of make this point where it's like, okay, well, you're buying tuna and it's line caught, so it's more sustainable because they're not dragging the bottom of the ocean to get tuna or whatever, and so you're not killing dolphins, and then you're happy about that. But in reality, no one's on the boats checking to see if they're actually line catching. No one has any idea what's happening in the middle of the ocean, 100 kilometers offshore, and so maybe these fishing companies are not fishing sustainably, and the governing body is just effectively collecting money and just saying, yeah, you're doing a good job, pay your fee, and we'll give you a stamp of approval. And so I guess, maybe with decentralization or the blockchain, we can kind of move away from this, but maybe the DAO is an interesting approach. Can you kind of explain like how you would envision that happening? Like why would a DAO be a better way?
I probably have to draw on some examples from the water DAO, something that we're working on as a certification body for water credits. Mm-hmm. So one process would be building out the technology to make it so that there's no one person in charge. So we want to build a water technology that monitors the inflow and outflow of the water project, so that if somebody wants to produce water credits, the device is shipped to them, and then the inflow and outflow can be monitored on the blockchain in real time. So it's sent to a database that they can't touch and can't be corrupted. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of stage one. Stage two would be figuring out how to test the results and everything, but that it's at least a very good start on the process.
Okay, that's great. So let's end with this. How can young people get involved with refi? Like, what does the future look like for high school students, university students? How can, or I don't know, even kids, how can we get the younger generation excited about truly making an environmental positive impact?
I would say just start the education process, get involved with the projects that you like. Blockchain companies don't really operate the same as traditional companies. It's kind of like, if you want to be a part of a project, you can probably just get active in their Discord and become a community member, and then just keep offering ways to help, especially with DAOs. I mean, DAOs are so interesting because there is no formal hiring process or anything. It's just get involved and you'll probably be rewarded because you'll be a participant in the DAO. So,
interesting.
Yeah, I would just say get involved and learn about the space, and then kind of choose where you want to wind up in and what you're passionate about.
I think that is what's so interesting about Web3 is that you can just, if you go on the Discord of that project and you get involved, like contribute in a meaningful way, like you may end up with a job, or you may end up with a role in some way that can be really helpful to that community. And so it's not about like sending out your resume, right? It's like kind of providing evidence that you add value, and based on the value you add, you can end up, being involved in a really interesting way.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been so great, James. I appreciate your time. I think it's, for me at least, it's kind of a world I'm unfamiliar with. And I think that the whole kind of certification and blockchain and decentralization of carbon credits and the credit system is new for a lot of people. So I think this will be really great for listeners to hear and to get an understanding of. I appreciate you being with me here today.
Oh, thanks a lot, Jared. It was a pleasure being here.
Thanks.